I didn't mean to find Black Hollow. I wasn't even looking for it. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, a weekend getaway into the mountains. Just me, my car, and the open road. The air was crisp, the sky a perfect shade of blue, and I had a playlist running, humming along as I drove. Everything felt normal. But then, my GPS glitched. 1 second, I had a clear route ahead. The next, the screen flickered, the map distorting before freezing completely. The time on my radio reset to 12 a.m., and every app on my phone refused to load. I was in the middle of nowhere, dense trees pressing in on either side, the road narrowing to something that barely passed for pavement. The only signs of civilization were the faded, rusting mile markers that seemed too old to belong to this decade. I should have turned around. I should have trusted that feeling in my gut. But something unseen, something I couldn't name, kept pulling me forward. And then, just as the sun started dipping below the horizon, I saw it. A wooden sign, cracked and covered in moss, standing just off the roadside. The letters were faded, barely visible beneath years of decay, but I could still make them out. Welcome to Black Hollow. A shiver ran through me. The name sounded familiar, though I had no idea why. I had never heard of Black Hollow before. It wasn't on any map I had checked before leaving, and yet there it was. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Everything inside me screamed to not go in, turn around, leave. But when I looked in my rearview mirror, the road behind me was gone. There was only darkness. The trees had swallowed the path whole. I swallowed hard, my hand shaking slightly as I shifted gears. There was no choice now. The only road left was forward. And so, I drove into Black Hollow. The moment I passed the crooked "Welcome to Black Hollow" sign, the air changed. It wasn't just the temperature, though it had dropped at least 10 degrees in an instant. It was something deeper, heavier, like stepping into a place where time had been stretched too thin, where the very air itself carried a weight no one could explain. The town was quiet, too quiet. The buildings were old, Victorian-style homes with sagging roofs, cracked wooden shutters hanging at odd angles, their windows so clouded with dust that they were nearly opaque. The streets were narrow, lined with rusting street lamps, but some of them were still flickering weakly, casting faint pools of light on the crumbling pavement. There were no people, no movement, no sound. And yet, I wasn't alone. I could feel it. A slow, creeping unease crawled up my spine, an instinctual warning buried in my bones. Something watched me from the windows. Something moved just beyond my line of sight. I parked my car in the center of the street, my heartbeat quickening as I tried to process what I was looking at. Everything here was perfectly preserved and completely abandoned at the same time. The buildings weren't collapsing, but they felt ancient. The streets weren't overgrown, but they felt untouched, like a place that had been waiting for me. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching softly against the cracked pavement. The sound echoed through the empty town like a gunshot. A shiver ran through me. Then, movement. A shadow flickered past a window of a nearby store. I spun toward it, my pulse hammering in my ears. The general store. The windows were fogged with dust, but I could see something inside. A single candle, flickering weakly. That was impossible. A town this old, this forgotten, shouldn't have an open flame burning inside a store that no one is tending. And yet, there it was. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. I knew I should leave. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn around, get back in the car, and drive until I found a road that made sense again. But my legs carried me forward. I pushed open the door. The bell above it let out a soft, broken chime, the kind that hadn't been rung in years. The smell of dust and old wood filled my lungs. Inside, the store was frozen in time. The shelves were stocked, cans of food with labels from the 1950s, glass bottles lined up neatly with names I didn't recognize, a cash register sitting open as if the clerk had left in a hurry. It should have felt abandoned, but it didn't. It felt like the people had just stepped away, and that at any moment they might come back. And then I saw it. Footprints. Fresh. They led deeper into the store, disappearing down a narrow aisle. I shouldn't have followed them, but I did. With each step, the whispers started. Faint and just beyond my reach. At first, I thought it was the wind, but there was no wind inside this place. Then, as I reached the back of the store, I realized they weren't whispers. They were breaths, right behind me. I turned, and the lights above me flickered violently. For a split second, the shelves were full of people. Tall, unmoving figures standing between the aisles, facing me, watching me with hollow eyes. The light blinked again. They were gone. But I wasn't alone. Something breathed against my ear.
You found us. Now you stay.
The door to the store slammed shut. The candle by the window snuffed out. And the town of Black Hollow locked me inside. I slammed against the store door, my hands clawing at the rusted handle. But it was locked. The whispers grew louder. The air behind me shifted, heavy and wrong. I could feel something standing there, breathing slow and deliberate, waiting for me to turn around. I didn't want to. I couldn't. But the lights flickered again, and this time, I saw them clearly. Figures lined the aisles, standing between rows of ancient canned goods and dust-covered bottles. Their bodies were thin, impossibly long, twisted in ways that bones shouldn't bend. Their faces, they didn't have faces. Just smooth, empty skin where eyes and mouths should have been. And yet, somehow, I knew they were smiling. I wrenched at the door handle, my breath coming in panicked gasps. The figures stood motionless, but the whispers in my ears twisted into words.
Stay. You belong here now.
I squeezed my eyes shut. My fingers fumbled in my pocket, searching for anything, a key, my phone, something real. My palm wrapped around my house keys, the sharp metal digging into my skin, and I latched onto that feeling, something solid, something from outside this place. I swung my arm back and hurled the keys as hard as I could. They clattered against the floor, landing somewhere behind the shelves. The whispers stopped. For a moment, the store was silent. Then, movement. The figures turned, their heads snapping toward the sound. And in that split second, I threw my entire weight against the door. It burst open. I stumbled into the street, gasping for air. The buildings loomed around me, their windows now filled with watching shadows. I didn't stop. I ran. But the town had changed. The streets twisted in ways that made no sense. The road I had driven in on was gone, replaced by a maze of dead-end alleys and warped storefronts that shouldn't have existed. No matter where I turned, I ended up back in the center of town. I was trapped. Then there was a sound, a soft metallic chime. I turned toward it, my heart hammering. There, standing in the doorway of a long-forgotten church, was a man. Or at least, something that looked like one. He wore a suit, perfectly pressed despite the dust of the town. His face was sharp, unnatural, and when he smiled, it was wrong. It was too wide. There were too many teeth.
You shouldn't have come here.
He said. His voice was like an echo, as if it wasn't really coming from him at all. I backed away. I didn't mean to. His smile widened.
That doesn't matter.
I looked around, desperate for a way out, but the town had sealed itself shut. The man took a slow step forward.
But there is a way.
He said, his voice slithering into my ears like a whisper of wind through the trees.
A trade, a soul, for a soul.
I shook my head. I'm not giving you my soul. The man chuckled.
Not yours.
I swallowed hard. Something cold coiled in my stomach.
A name.
He continued, watching me with unblinking eyes.
Give me a name and you walk free. Someone else takes your place.
I didn't speak. I didn't move. He tilted his head.
It's not so difficult. You know someone, don't you? Someone who deserves this more than you.
I opened my mouth, then stopped. His smile faltered. And then I ran. I don't know how. I don't know what changed. But suddenly, the buildings blurred around me, the streets twisting into something unfamiliar, the air heavy with something unseen. And then, I was back in my car. I didn't ask questions. I just drove. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't check the road behind me. I just kept driving until the trees thinned, until my GPS blinked back to life, until the road ahead was familiar again. By the time I stopped, I was hours away, but my hands were still shaking. And on my windshield, written in the dust, was a single word: run. Some places don't want to be found. Some towns were forgotten for a reason. But if you ever stumble upon a place that wasn't on your map, if you take a wrong turn and find yourself somewhere that feels too quiet, too empty, too old, turn around. Because once you step inside, you may never leave. If this story left you with a lingering chill, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a spooky Saturday story. And tell me, have you ever taken a wrong turn and ended up somewhere that didn't feel right? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching Cabin of Whispers. See you next time.